Hey, everybody, community, happy Thursday. I am Dan
Happy
and
Thursday. I'm Patrick. Happy Thursday, everybody.
Patrick. I thought we were,
Oh,
I thought
Pat.
you were Pat. All
I
right.
told
Well,
you. You asked me
Patrick.
about this before. You asked me about this before. I tend to introduce myself as Patrick professionally,
Okay.
but I'm delighted when people call me Pat. I make it really
So
complex.
that's so confusing. Yeah. I mean, that's just like it's complexity, man. Welcome everyone. It's good to see some regular faces here. Wow, Ben is back. Ben, Kristen, I just saw you come on. Welcome. Elsa, you're back. I think 3 weeks in a row. You might be getting
Hey,
you
Ben.
might have the record here. Um, Gislin or Gislin, sorry, I always forget if it's a soft Gislin or Gislin, but so good to see you again. And you're going to be on our show soon. I can't wait. Chris Broderick, welcome, and a lot of other familiar faces coming on. So Pat, how are you doing? Well, as people are coming on, what's new in your life other than the fourth
Yeah,
impeachment hearing going on, which I know you're
fourth.
obsessed with. The fourth,
Let's,
yeah,
yeah, in history, yeah.
in history,
Um,
yes.
let's just
Let's not
move
talk
past
about
that
that.
conversation. I'm doing okay. So we're broadcasting from the Twin Cities, Minneapolis here. It's freezing cold. I think we've been mostly below zero for the last week, and I was looking out ahead for the next week. We're going to continue to be mostly below zero. So this is a time of resilience for people who live up here. But I was like just talking to my wife last night. We have dogs, and we were like, and of course our dogs are getting squirrely and crazy. And I was starting to look online for maybe places we could drive to, like a day or two away, just to like get out of town for a week, and work remotely. And I was looking at like New Orleans, like it's going to be like a low of 26 or something next Tuesday. It's cold everywhere except for maybe the
Yeah,
Southwest and West Coast. So
yeah.
it's a rough couple weeks for everybody.
But the sun's been out, and so for us in Minneapolis, it's small things, right? Like
I love
it's
it.
sunny. It's minus 50, but it's sunny. Um, so a handful of other people joining. Good to see this community continues to grow, and also just the continued folks that come back to it. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like family for me. So really appreciate that. Um, And so I'm gonna. One thing I just want to mention, and speaking of the show and community, so we've been. I think this is our third show, and we haven't been all that organized. Frankly, we've been getting some incredible guests every week. We usually let them know 4 or 5 days before we go live, but we have the next 4 weeks booked. So I feel like it's incredible. We're getting um, very organized. It's so proactive of us. And just quickly, next week, and I think Ben is on. So we have Ben Bratt and Allison Smith. Spoiler alert. This is going to be an interesting one. Pat, you and I can just sit back. We don't have to do a single thing
No, it's gonna be fun.
with Ben and Allison.
Wimbledon,
So
Wimbledon. It's gonna be like watching
yeah,
Wimbledon.
I'm taking the day off. In fact, I might just. So that'll be great. The week after that, we have Jess Von Bank and Jason Averbook from LeapGen. So that's going to be a super fun conversation. So there'll be we're doing, I guess, doubles for
Doubles. Speaking of
folks.
tennis, yeah.
Speaking of tennis, and then on March 4th, we have Lori Rudiman, who is, if you don't know her, you probably do know her. She is a one of the leading voices in HR, and been a friend for a long time. So we're really excited to have her. And then on the 11th, we have Ian Cook of Vizier joining us. So we have an incredible next month of guests. So we're super excited about that. But today, in about 5 or 10 minutes or so, we're going to bring Sean Higgins on, who is the CEO of Better You. And this is going to be a fun conversation today. We're going to be talking about the concept of time. Right? How do we use it? How do we use it in a world that's become extraordinarily digital, especially during the pandemic? We talk about the concept of how do we stay connected and connectedness. And I think we've all been doing a good job, but it's been primarily digital for the past 12 months now. And what's the impact of that? And how are we self-moderating time with our devices and our phones, and also living in the quote unquote real world? And Sean has some really fascinating data and interesting perspective on this, and has created an awesome technology, which we'll talk about. But before we go into that, Pat, I know you're more thoughtful than me on how you disconnect. If you email me at 1 in the morning, I'm probably responding for better or for worse. But Pat, I know you're doing some more thoughtful, meditative, disconnecting from tech. So tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, and even to go back, I mean, this has been a kind of a category and an idea I've been interested in for, gosh, probably even 10 years now. When with our last company, Modern Survey, we were obviously focused on employee engagement, but we were also, you and I, Dan and Don, our third partner, and our team, we were all working like incredibly hard as startup founders to try and build and grow that company, which we did. And with it came an enormous amount of stress. And I started to develop some techniques, about 12 years ago to help me deal with the stress personally. And that started with, doing yoga, kind of just learning how to get my energy more balanced. I have learned through the years I'm someone who can work really, really, really hard for a long time, but then I tend to pay for it later. So the challenge for me is how do I moderate that all a little bit, and then how do I slow things down so I can make better decisions, see things more clearly. And I started to learn as I started to bring things like yoga in and just basic physical activities, giving myself time to walk and think, slow things down. I would start to do better work, and I was happier, and I was better at home, and better husband, and better in my community. So I just ended up having more capacity by slowing down. And so that's just sort of the paradox of thinking about hard work. But
Yeah.
recently, I have been, once we things changed for me, once we sold the business and I started new ventures like making a movie, and then the pandemic happened, and I found myself starting to get back to some old habits of working way too hard again, and starting to kind of push myself a little into the red. And I'm getting older and older too, and it's less and less resilience, I think, to be able to do that. So yeah, so I just started to use tech, uh, some techniques, really just even in the last 3 or 4 months. Finally got an Apple Watch last summer, and I first got it because I wanted to keep track of my exercising, my running, which I was starting to work on last summer, and just started to kind of inventory what I was doing. And then in many ways, what it ends up being about, as I've been learning, is just how do you use digital tools to help you make space in the real world to take care of yourself. And that's been
Yeah.
I've been trying to be a focus for me with some wins and losses over the last couple months.
Yeah. It's funny how technology can be our worst enemy to some degree, and also it can save us. And I
Hmm.
think we're sort of at this moment in time where there's a lot of self-reflection and how we use tech and the communities that we live in technology and the echo chambers and what's fact versus someone else's fact. And I don't want to say fiction, right? I want to be careful with that. And what's reality versus maybe completely not reality, right? And I think this is just a really we're in a very transformational time, and tech's not going anywhere. So we need and the social side of tech, and how we stay connected as friends and communities. It's a really beautiful thing that we have it, but we just need to make sure it doesn't get the worst of us. And everyone knows
Yeah.
I'm an optimist, so I do believe we'll find a way forward. But
Well,
so
I think, yeah, you really framed that up well, Dan, because I think the dark side of tech is that it can reinforce what I would say are weaknesses and our bad behaviors. And I do think, we certainly have experienced that culturally, over the last 3 or 4 years, certainly in the political divides. I think, again, there's certain parts of our personality that are wired a certain way, tech can keep pulling us deeper and deeper and deeper into these kind of dark holes of what feel like information and meaning to us, but they can start to become some really bad habits. But tech
yeah,
can also be a tool to help us change behaviors,
absolutely,
and in a more positive way, which hopefully serves our interests. And we'll talk about this with Sean, but not just our interest in quality of life, but also for our team, for our family, and then ultimately even for the organization. So there's this way to kind of really think, really we always talk about the atomic level of understanding behavior and perception, right,
yeah,
for a person at any given moment. And tech has the potential to help lead us toward hopefully good benefits, and
yeah.
improvements that serves not just us but our communities, our families, and the organizations where we work. That's the optimism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing we'll talk about with Sean shortly here is, tech usage is up for the most part across generations, with some exceptions. I know Sean shared some data with us a month or two ago about 2020, and it's actually surprising. And I'll let Sean talk about it. But around some generations where you'd think usage is up, and we're using WhatsApp and Messenger and texting, it's actually not as up as high as you would think. And I think we can debate that today. What are some of the reasons as to why? But in general, it absolutely is up, and we have to hope people are using it for good. So a couple things before we introduce Sean. We have a great community online today, and I'm going to give everyone a warning, and I'm going to ask a favor. If a few of you would be willing to, after we're talking with Sean, to even come on for a minute or two and let us know what are you doing, and how you self-moderate tech and work-life balance, and staying connected to people versus kind of living in quote unquote the real world. Would love to just hear from you. And I can just bring you online. So if you, I'm giving everyone warning, because if you're in pajamas, again, we don't care. Pajamas are good. But if you want to come online, please just note in the comments, and then when the time comes, I will add you to the screen, and we can see your smiling face and hear a little bit of what you're doing. So we want to make this interactive. And Sonia is joined. Thank you for joining. Mahila. Awesome, good, so great to see you again. We have a handful of folks from London on today, and this is very nice to see. So I think without further ado, I want to introduce Sean. So he, as I mentioned in the beginning, he's the CEO of Better You, and I love his personal mission statement. I'm just going to read it for you. He's committed to creating a world where your time on device isn't optimized by apps or advertisers. It's optimized for the things that you care about most. I think that it's just, I love it. It's specific, it's focused. You read it and you nod. You say, yes, that makes complete sense. And Sean is a high energy guy. If you think I'm high energy, I'm going to have to take a back seat on this one. So Sean, I'm giving you a slam your coffee. We got about 20 seconds here. And really looking forward to have you on. And Pat, any words before we bring Sean?
Yeah, and I first met Sean maybe about 2 years ago. Sean, you might remember better than I do, but it was kind of postmodern survey, and as I was starting to do more advisory work with the startup community here in the Twin Cities, and even more broadly, especially around HR tech startups, I was introduced to Sean, and was immediately impressed with Sean, not only in terms of what his mission was, what he was doing, but Sean is an entrepreneur as well. So Sean's going to be someone who's going to be with us for a while, one way or the other here. So I really look forward to bringing him into the conversation.
Yeah. Good. All right. Hey, Sean, you should have an invite. So we'll see you in a moment. This Crowdcast is always consistent for us. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. There he is.
Just like magic.
Sean, just like that.
Perfect. Good
Sean,
to be here, gang.
Good to see you.
Man,
so tell us about you.
What's going on, man?
Well, you already hit the nail on the head. It's cold outside. I went for a walk to my car, and it was not pleasant. I don't check the temperatures, and that's a mistake on days like today.
It felt kind of oddly. I don't know what it was. Maybe I'm just getting so used to it, but it didn't seem to affect me as much today. I have no idea why.
I gotta follow your maybe you got better winter gear than me, Dan. I don't know. I go out there, all I have is like a scarf and like a lighter jacket, and I struggle.
Yeah, you gotta have the gear. Yeah. Where are you broadcasting from today, Scott? Are you at the Osborne?
We're at Osborne 370 downtown St. Paul.
Great.
Good. So Sean, tell us. Go ahead, Pat.
I was going to say, just as we're kind of warming up, Sean, just actually explain that space, that building, because it's actually a pretty cool community that's going on there with different startups. Because a little insight into the Twin Cities startup community, and then we'll jump right into the topic. But yeah, Sean's kind of at the center of it.
Yeah, so Osborne 370. So we've been here since October 2018. We've really got to see it come a full circle. It's a big co-working space for tech companies. You've got Structural up on floor 6. You've got Techstars from the Fork on floor 8. You've got Smart Care, which is a health tech company that's spun out of Optum. So a bunch of different folks building things. UpSee is on floor 12. So it's a really cool community. They'll do a lot of different beta.mn showcase events here. In normal times, you get to see a lot more folks, which is tons of energy. I'm looking forward to when life at the building returns a little bit more to that. But it's still a lot of fun. We still bump into people from time to time, and it's a good time to engage with folks building neat things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's a really great space. I always love when I have an excuse to come visit, whether it's Scott up at Structural or you or another startup. So it's great stuff.
Absolutely.
Good. So Sean, tell us, we gave you an intro, but tell us about Better You and what are you guys solving for? I mean, what's your, if you're succeeding on a daily basis, what are you doing for your clients?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Better You is a digital coach. We're designed to help people make the most of their time. And so we ask you, what's important? Do you have goals of your life, like physical health? Maybe you want to get more sleep, or you're trying to get more exercise. It could be social health. Maybe there's people in your world that you want to stay more readily connected with. You could even have goals around your own personal development, learning new things, or mindfulness and meditation. And so how we measure success is how close are we able to get you to 100% in those goal areas week over week. And what's so awesome, as of actually last quarter, we had metrics that folks with a sleep goal on Better You, we had over half of them getting an extra 30 minutes a night, which was just so special. Because I think about sleep as something I've personally struggled with in the past. And, when you see that 30 minutes, night over night, that means something. I say, wow, I even now today, I could probably use an extra 30 minutes. I only had 7 hours last night. I'm like, I could probably use the extra 30 minutes. So it's really phenomenal to be able to work with folks on that level.
Yeah, that's based on what the past 12 months of just having to, the stress levels that we've been experiencing and we know are alive and well in organizations, and just getting a little extra sleep, focusing on health, and organizations, I think, have a responsibility to look after their employees. And, we're big believers in that, and big believers in that's a big part of allowing a person be their whole person at work. So I guess to kind of kick this conversation off, Sean, I want to first tackle this big, we're not going to solve for it, but this concept of and real concept of work-life balance. And what does this mean in 2021 and beyond? And I know this is not a one-size-fits-all conversation, and it differs between generations and
Yep.
gender. We know women in the workplace, there's a lot of data that indicates there's a lot of opportunity and work to be done there. And remote workers versus non-remote workers, of course, this is a whole nother element of it. But what data and insights have you at Better You uncovered with your research, with client data, and how would you define this in a modern 2021 world, and what do organizations need to be thinking about with work-life balance?
Yeah, I love it. It's a great question. And I would actually maybe go back to a point you mentioned earlier, which is that device time's gone up every single year. And it's gone up every single year since 2007. That was the definitive year for whatever reason, where it's like, well, not for whatever reason. The iPhone comes out, right, pretty shortly thereafter. And the world is never the same. And so we have this feeling of connectedness, right, that we had far more than we ever have had in the past. And what we see that leading to, some of the big risks around work-life balance, is this idea of the presence prison, where you feel like you have to always be online. I need the green dot to be flashing next to my name on Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is. And that's a very detrimental thing. It creates this race to the bottom, because I don't want to be perceived as less hardworking than my coworker Steve, and Steve's light's still blinking. So I better keep my light blinking as long as Steve's light's blinking. And so it can be a very slippery slope for a lot of folks and a lot of teams. So I think it's up to companies to help kind of create a more inclusive culture around that, make it okay to be offline. So actually our one small tactical thing we do here at Better You as a team, we set our default Slack, our messaging app, to away. Like, everyone's away all the time. No one is at lights ever actually green. And so the expectation is a little different. Like, we expect you to be doing things, and we trust you to do that. That's why we hired you. but you don't need to worry about if your light is on. And if you leave somebody a message late in the day, they'll probably get back to you tomorrow, and that's okay. So it's all about kind of setting those expectations, I think, and letting folks know it's okay to not be online. That's a big starting point for it. But happy to dive deeper, because when COVID happened, obviously how people spent their time changed quite a bit. So happy to share more on that side of the ball too.
So, one question, I know you shared some data. So is from a generational standpoint, where did we see usage going up the most over the past 6 months, or whatever time frame is more relevant?
So I would say we measure a few different things, right? So we measure app usage data. That's one of the big things we measure. We also measure things like steps, exercise, sleep, social connection time. Because the thing that we've noticed is, you only still have 24 hours in the day. So if your device time is going up, and say it's Instagram or YouTube, well, that's time that's coming from somewhere else. So there's got to be something else kind of taking a hit. And so when you look at who's had kind of the biggest lift in overall device time, it's not terribly unsurprising, but it is that Gen Z demographic. What was interesting for us over the last year is that Gen Z they're a more tech savvy generation than me. I'll admit to that right now. They know more about everything about these things. But what's interesting is you would almost expect that group to not be impacted as dramatically as they were. So we saw things like Gen Z in the workforce, that youngest demographic, their physical movement dropped by 51% within 3 weeks of being sent home. So instead of walking around corporate campus, you're in your apartment with other roommates in your room. And that's a day in the life. And for a lot of folks, that's still a day in the life. What we saw on the flip side, right? We saw social connection, which we expected to explode, because you're not able to see your friends as easily anymore in April of 2020. What we were surprised with is that it did go up, but it only went up 9 minutes a day. So while you were at home, you were doing more FaceTime or phone calls on that side, but it was only enough to total 9 minutes, which didn't feel like a very substantial movement at all for these types of folks. And then on the flip side, you talked about app usage. Absolutely right. The winners of the whole thing for that demographic were social media apps. You had TikTok, which is, of course, still doing very, very well. TikTok's usage increased 300% between March and April. If you were a 25-year-old with that app on your phone, you spent on average 12 hours a week there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think, hey, Pat, one note, there your video's back. Awesome. We lost you for a moment.
Okay.
Sean, do you think that, and I'm not cutting on TikTok whatsoever, but do you think that was primarily a little bit of boredom? I mean, is that why we saw that an app like that just skyrocket?
I think there's a couple reasons. First, I would say TikTok is really well designed. If you look at what makes people stop using an app, what makes people end sessions, we usually look at things like stopping queues, right? If you think about the old school Facebook feed where it ended, it was a queue, you're all caught up, everything's done. TikTok, you can go for hours going down different sub threads and different hashtags and things. So it's a very well designed app from a behavioral design perspective. So I think that's part of it. But in terms of getting folks initially interested, yeah, it was a way to try something, right? I'm at home. If I'm in my 20s, I'm probably not in the caretaker. We're having to worry about caring for a child or things on that side. So I've got extra hours in my day. I'm not commuting. What should I do with this time? And that became the predominant spot, the winner, even more so than Instagram. Instagram was up, but it was up about 50% in terms of usage. So for context, TikTok, night and day, the winner of April 2020.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I have a question, John. So, the paradox of work that you're trying to do, and Dan framed it up earlier, sort of, digital life versus real life. And I love what you guys are trying to do, which is say, hey, I want to, like you said, I've only got so many kind of chips on the table to deal with every day, and a chip represents 15 minutes or whatever, right? Yep. So I got to figure out where to allocate those. And I say, I want to spend more time maybe it's in the real world or taking a walk, or like as you always say, calling my mom, or whatever those different times we are. But the paradox
He's a good son. I don't call my mom enough.
I don't know if I do it enough either. But anyway, I bet Sean's a good son. I totally lost my train of thought. So the paradox is we're using technology in order to use it, if it does well, to use it less, right? So we're using technology as a way to behaviorally get us away from the technology to do something kind of in the real world. So you talked about the behavioral design of TikTok, right? Which is geniusly designed to kind of get us to compulsively, go down these threads, and there's a dopamine response, or all those things that happen as we get into that zone. So how do you design this technology to work against that, and maybe emulate that or simulate that, in that we are getting a positive response out of doing things in the real world, and while we're not coming back to obsess with our phone? So how does this work? How are you guys seeing the solution?
Well, it's a complicated problem, and you have to be careful not to become the thing you're trying to beat, right? So when I think about it, there's usually a starting point that I start from, which is, are we helping people to do something they already want to do? If we're helping them be successful in that, even if we're leveraging some behavioral design techniques, which we have to do because it's the name of the game, we're on good footing, right? Because we're not doing it to increase time on page so we can make a buck on an ad. We're doing it because we're going to try to help you get more steps today, or get that extra 30 minutes of sleep tonight. And so that's kind of really where we start. When I think about what we've fundamentally tried to solve for, it's one hack. There's one hack that we believe is one of the main reasons why time on device keeps going up and to the right. And the hack is called the menu problem. So the menu problem, what it means is, if you're presented with a list of options, you pick something. So if I'm at a restaurant and I, say I'll have number 7, I probably could have asked for pasta. They could have made me pasta. Sure, it's not that hard. But I've never done that, right? Versus every other time I just pick an option in front of me. And so then the question is, which choice really matters? The one that I made, or the person who picks the options that I get to pick from? And so when you start seeing Twitter as a menu, you realize that the options in front of you aren't options that you put there at all. They're options that Twitter put there about, hey, here's a tweet Sean might engage with, and retweet or like or follow. And that's really what we try to solve for. So we delivered these nudges. And a nudge, all it is it's something you said you wanted to do this week that you haven't had time for. And we deliver it at a moment when you're about to go down the rabbit hole. So for us, the whole idea is, can we get an option on your menu when you're about to take 20 minutes and throw it away that's going to be something important enough to you to say, wait a minute, sorry, Twitter, I do want to call mom instead, because that's an option you're never going to see if, just left to Twitter's own devices.
That's amazing. Thanks for explaining it that way. And I know you're going to jump in, but I do love this because, we start to break this down. There's that, Dan and I always talk about behavior awareness and the behavior modification, but there's also another thing you're talking about, which is behavior kind of tension, right? So, which is like, what's the thing I want to do, or you presented to me, right? And so that's the step towards the behavior modification. And, this is just what humans are complicated. Well, I guess any living creature is complicated. So to repattern, to remove towards things, there is a lot of science and design that needs to come into it. Dan, you were going to jump in.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm Pat. You've actually brought up one. We talk about the need, the humanization of work, right? I mean, this is in the front and center, and we talk about, sounds easy enough, but is one of the most complex things, right? The human being and everything you're talking about, Sean, and what motivates people, how do we change behaviors, what inspires people, emotions, right? How do we handle people's emotions? And so, this leads me to a question too around, and I know Ben Bratt's on, and I would love, Ben, your perspective on this too. But when you think about, so teams are having to work right now, for the most part, virtually.
Yep.
And do you think there's a different interaction? And this is, I'm kind of not so much video, and Pat and I were having a conversation about this yesterday, that does sort of the virtual world does it give you the right to act different? I'm going to use an extreme example. We see a lot more online bullying. We see a lot more, people criticizing, taking cover in the fact that it feels almost fake because they're in a they're protected in a virtual world. And so I get concerned, and I wonder, this kind of the virtual workforce and using technology like Slack, do we get honest, open, transparent conversations, or do people sort of step out of the real, authentic selves and become a little different? And I know this is a big question, and I know, and I called out Ben too, because Ben's an expert in how do you create awesome teams, right? That feel safe with each other, that trust each other, that have the same purpose, the same mission. But what are your thoughts on that big question?
Yeah, I think you certainly will see it. I think especially about social media interactions, right? Where it's very easy to have a strong opinion when there's, you're not actually going to ever meet this person. I'm not going to have to ride an elevator up a couple floors with this person. And I definitely think you can lose pieces of it. With your teams, it's important to let folks know, hey, I know we're doing a lot more with Slack, but we don't use this as a source of record to say, oh, I got you, like, oh, you said this and it was actually that other thing. I always really try to approach it with our team internally from a problem solving component. When there's an issue, we're working on a new feature, something goes wrong, I'm not going through the Slack thread to see who said we should do it this way. That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is we've got something that's going wrong. What are 3 ideas we could come up with to try to solve it? And I think as long as you're showing folks that it's not a system of record that you're going to try to come back to and have a gotcha moment, I think then you're going to have a better chance of facilitating more real conversations. Because folks know if everyone was in the office, I could grab them and we'd go to a room and we'd whiteboard stuff, and they know that they can come up with real ideas and disagree and be candid, and there's not going to be a recourse because we're trying to all get to the same spot.
Yeah. No, thanks for that clarification, and that gives me hope hearing that from you too. Because I think this is the new. I mean, oh, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, Dan, just I can't see your video. I don't know if others can, but we can hear you fine.
Oh, okay.
And it may be on my side too. But Dan, I was actually going to steer the conversation, and maybe this is where you're going to go next. I can't remember the exact outline, but because I mean this whole. It's just really kind of a behavior conversation, and where you guys just took it was more of a meta level, right? Which is kind of how do humans, what behaviors do we see, what patterns do we see in different contexts? Dan and I, you were talking about this last night, but like a social experiment, like if you were to have the same 2 people and design it where one situation is where someone cuts someone off on a sidewalk, and they don't know each other, like how do they resolve that? And my hypothesis would be that, because they're face to face, like you said, John, it's like they're in the elevator. They have to kind of work through it one way. Right. You put the same 2 people in 2 cars and one cuts off the other person, right? Then tends to be a different kind of dynamic, because there's that sense of protection, I guess, because there's a car wrapped around them, or maybe because it's more of a jeopardy situation because it's higher risk because you could have killed me, And then the third one is what happens in a social media context where someone tries to interject someone else, and then and if you had the same 3 people through experiments, like what would we learn about those people, and are they different in those different scenarios, and how do they conduct themselves? So anyway, that's sort of the French philosopher like 1968 meta analysis of that. But where I wanted to go actually next with this is, so when we think about the behaviors, so you're really working at the at the individual level, right? So the benefit you're focused on is, hey, we're going to trying to help individuals get out of their digital life and more into their real life, because we think it's going to bring them a benefit of a life better lived, right? And gets to this, which almost sounds like an old concept now, work-life balance, that institutions thought about it, but it really is, hey, help me have a better life, and less stressed, and I get to do more of the things I want to do. But if you start expanding that out into, say, the team level, and trying to get behaviors where collectively as a team toward this, or then even an organizational level, when you guys are selling into a company and you're, what are you learning about how this tech can work at those kind of 3 different levels, kind of individual, team, and organization?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. Ideally, the habits that folks are building at an individual level are things that they can share with the team, things that the team can build muscle around. Ultimately, we had clients who the number of emails they were sending at 1 a.m. in May was at an all-time high. And I said, man, the number of emails being sent at 1 a.m, I'm hopeful would be pretty. I know you mentioned, Dan, you have this problem. You're like, anytime I'm going to go fire them off. But hopefully at the organization level, it'd be pretty low, the percentage of people actually, doing that, because obviously they have sleep goals and things of that nature. And so we're hoping to build muscle, not just at the individual level, but having things that can roll up to the team. And this usually translates into a win for a company at 2 levels. One can be on a health cost perspective, right? If you're getting better sleep, the chances of you having anxiety or stress-related issues goes down. If you're getting better social connection, the chance of you getting depression goes down. If you're getting more exercise, the chance of you having issues that are, more physically health related goes down. So these are different pieces that ultimately having a healthier company can help you have a more sustainable company where folks can stick it in and really help be a part of something bigger towards the company's overall mission.
But how do you feed that back? Yeah, Dan, you go ahead.
Oh yeah.
No, actually, first, is my video back?
Yep.
Yes,
I can see you.
Okay, awesome, good. So number one, I mean, that's so important, and again, it kind of comes back to that responsibility of organizations to create an environment where an organization can't create sort of an individualized, this is what, Sean, you need, and to feel healthy, and this is the amount of sleep you need, so we're going to build a schedule around that. But it has to sort of create an environment where everyone can be themselves. And if someone wants to send emails at 1 a.m.,
sure,
because they're, again, and the other thing too with that is we consult with a lot of companies, and there's some people who have families who are putting kids to bed at 10 or 11 p.m. and that's when they have to work. They don't want to, but that's when they have to. So I think that, and so it's sort of honoring that and being okay with that during this very transitional time. But I think having a peer support system amongst team and peers and leadership where we can say it's okay. You don't need to work until 2 a.m. This can wait until tomorrow. It's this hurry up. This has to be done by tomorrow morning culture, right? That I hope we're starting to take a step back from, and at least I'm seeing it with organizations we're working for. There's more of a relaxed, and we use the word caring, right? Leaders and organizations are caring more about their people. And it's not caring, are they getting the work done? It's caring, are you healthy? Are you happy? Is your relationship suffering? Are you taking care of yourself? So therefore, because we know if you're taking care of yourself and you're happy and you're healthy, you are going to be more effective for us too. So it's a two-way street. But and so I guess I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, and I think it's but it takes responsibility of organization leaders and managers to really build that culture.
Yeah, and just if I could jump in, and then Sean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, which is so picking what Dan said, but how do we design that into the solution of the product, and that we have that collective sense of empathy and connection? How, like, what are you learning about that? Because there's a behavioral social science part of that, I think, and then there's a product design and implementation. So how do we do this?
My favorite behavior model is called the Fogg model. It's by BJ Fogg. He created the Stanford Innovation Lab. And BJ's an interesting guy. The Robinhood founders, the Instagram founders, all went through his class. So some folks will say, well, this is one of the guys who could be why we're here, where we are. But what he created is really something special that can be applied in a lot of different contexts, including at an organization. So when you look at a behavior, the Fogg model breaks it down into three things: motivation, ability, and trigger. So how motivated is someone to do a given action? Am I motivated to drink water, for example? Well, if I'm thirsty, that's a high motivation. Ability, how hard is the thing we're asking Sean to do? Well, if my water bottle is in my car, parked 4 blocks away, that's a pretty, I don't know if I'm going to go get that drink of water, because that's a pretty tough thing for me to go commit to. And then trigger, is there a prompt, something that I see? Could be on my device, could be a person I see that is drinking water and makes me think, oh man, I am thirsty. And so when we think about that in the context of our companies, we can apply those same concepts to behaviors we're hoping to have our team members have, right? Maybe it's we have an issue around timeliness for a meeting, right? So often we as leaders focus on the motivation piece. Oh, why doesn't Sean want to show up to the meeting on time? Usually how I think of the model, I actually work inversely. The first thing I look at is triggers. What are the triggers that Sean has in his day that remind him to show up to the meeting? If I don't have a calendar reminder 5 minutes before, we could implement that. And usually if you can get a trigger where there isn't one, your success rate grows up dramatically. The second thing I think about is ability, right? If I'm asking Sean to do a Zoom when maybe it's early in the morning and in his time zone, he's not ready, he doesn't have, he hasn't brushed his teeth or whatever. And so he's a little self-conscious. Well, what if we just make it so we can dial in, and that becomes socially acceptable with our team, right? Suddenly we've made it easier. So I generally work backwards with the model. So I start with the trigger. Can we add triggers into Sean's day that are going to help him remember about this thing he wanted to do? ability? Is there possibilities for me to make this thing easier for him to do? And then finally, the last one I look at is motivation, which is, why does Sean naturally want to attend the meeting? Does he think it's valuable? Are there other things we could do to make it more valuable? So often I have experienced, and I've done this poorly too, where I say, hey, like, what's the deal? Like, why don't you want to be here? When really it's, oh, I don't have a reminder to be here. And you have to uncover that after a bit of detective work.
Yeah,
That's really
I love that, and it kind of ties into Chris Broderick. Thanks for your statement. Many companies are prioritizing empathy, and Sean, to your point, if we're saying let's use triggers first, so meaning giving the freedom to an individual to make decisions based on triggers that are important to them, and they have to be in a culture and an organization that does prioritize caring and does prioritize empathy. So because that's, again, I completely agree that the triggers coming first. I love that, but in order for that to sustain itself in an organization, the company has to be okay with the fact Sean's going to dial into this meeting because, for whatever reason, or Sean is going to walk to his car and get that water because he is so thirsty, it's worth it. Right? He's going to pass out during the meeting, so therefore he's going to be 10 minutes late. And that's being empathetic, and that's caring for your well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as you build this culture, what's so powerful is having other peers that are kind of doing similar things to you. So maybe we're both trying to be better about not, doing emails late at night, or we're both trying to be better about, what we eat or exercise. Sometimes suddenly just seeing that other person, it becomes a trigger, a real world trigger, not a push notification on my phone. But I see Pat and I go, wow, yeah, Pat and I are doing this exercise thing together. Shoot, I should probably schedule a workout this week. I've fallen behind on it. And it's those moments that you have, right? Where you're walking around the house and then you have that, oh, this thing, I forgot about this thing. And that's a good trigger will create more of those moments in your life and make them less random.
Yeah. And that is like, to take it up to the meta level now. So many applications are trying to use that, especially the consumer side, this kind of stuff, because I find myself schizophrenically trying to, kind of keep 6 or 7 thoughts or things going at any given moment. And then something gets my attention. Oh, that's what I need to focus on now, because all those things line up, and that's kind of what, from a employee experience design, HR tech perspective, that's what we're competing with. Right.
Yep.
And that, yeah. So it's a really, from an employee experience design perspective, what you just laid out is just like a critical part of approaching strategy, because we can have all these sort of, high intentions, but in the end, we're dealing with a very complex competitive behavior, situation.
And this is what we're up against too, right? When you see someone who's going down a different path, like the TikTok example, right? TikTok is using these same ideas, but they're applying them probably for their reasons, right? So I can increase time on page and get ads. It was funny. The algorithm engineer for YouTube 2 years ago published a tell-all of how their engine works. He quit his job, or he lost his job shortly thereafter. You obviously can't do that. But what he talks about, he said, it's funny that we've got one of the most advanced algorithms in the world. And the problem that it's working on is how to separate people from their time. Like, it's just so interesting that's what it's working on, right? And so that's really what we're up against. But if we can use those same techniques for good to help people make most of their day, to help our teams be more productive and happy in their jobs.
Yeah, I love that. It ties into, again, Pat, what you and I just preach and believe in. It's that allowing someone to be their complete self, their whole person, their whole human at work. And this is such an important part of it. So I do have another question I'm going to kind of guide us into, but first, community. If anyone want to come on just for a minute or two and kind of let us know, what are you doing to help manage technology usage and work and real life? We would love to see some interaction, and no pressure. But if anyone wants to, just say hi and raise your hand, and I will bring you online. I'm counting on one of you. I know that I'm looking at everyone online here. I know we have a lot of brave souls here. So I will be watching that, and if someone volunteers, I'll bring you in. So Sean, I think I guess as we start to wind down the conversation. So what would be, I always like to make these calls very actionable.
Yeah.
So folks on the call can really take something away. I mean, we're taking so much away, but really specific. And when we think about how do we use technology to, in some degree, save us from ourselves, right? And in a world, everything that we've talked about, right, with just kind of healthy addiction and unhealthy addiction to technology, whether it's TikTok in a good or bad way, or Facebook in a good or bad way. But how, what are some tips? I mean, what can people start to do? Not the individual level. Let's focus there, I think, for now. What can we start to do tonight, tomorrow, to really start to, and especially if someone's struggling and feeling stressed and feeling chaotic and has 50 things and they don't know where to start or how to prioritize, what can they do? What would your advice be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would start with this guy right here, and my advice there would be thinking about what are the habits you have on your device that you don't love. I can give you one that I personally struggled with. If I have an idle moment, I would pick up my phone and I would go into an app. One of the ones that was on my main page, which is actually used to be Twitter, and I would just start, scrolling away because I'm waiting for the elevator, or I'm in line at the grocery store, or whatever it might be. And so if that's something that you find yourself doing a lot, there's a couple tactics you can do. So one is give yourself stopping cues. We talked about the menu problem before. And if you can add some different stopping cues to prevent you from going down the rabbit hole, it's harder, right? You're taking that ability section, you're making it harder for you to go down and just go into Twitter right away. So my Twitter actually lives in a social media folder on the last page of my app screen. So I have to swipe 4 times to get to it. I clear out all the apps on my homepage. So I don't want anything there, not even my phone call app. It's just a blank, like scenic background. It's just like an image I will look at. And the reason I do this is it helps me cut down on the amount of autopilot phone sessions that I have. This is one that's interesting. The average phone session is actually very, very short. It's about 30 seconds is what people spend on their device. That's the average phone session. And it varies a lot by age. But phone sessions follow the same type of distribution as populations in the US. The average US population is 9,000 for a town, but New York City is in that average, right? So obviously it can get way, way bigger. Phone sessions are the exact same way. The average might be 30 seconds, but it can go for hours if you let it. So by limiting what you have on your main page, by foldering up the apps that are kind of your troublemaker apps and putting them somewhere else, you add more stopping cues into your path. Say, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? Because it's not clear what the cost is of that next swipe on Twitter, but it's something. It's your time, right? And so if you can put that a little further away from reach, you're going to make it harder to go down those many rabbit holes.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. And I'm reading some playing Scrabble. I guess that's a good, that is actually a very healthy game for the brain.
I started doing crossword puzzles again. Man, we actually do them at home when we're making dinner. Me and Jennifer
Nice.
It's such a nice, and we can't use our phones. That's the thing. Like, no cheating. You got to rely on the gray matter to figure this stuff out.
I have one: memorize phone numbers. Just get rid of all the contacts, and when you text someone, actually force yourself to memorize phone numbers. I think the only numbers I know are probably the childhood friends from when I was literally, doing the rotary number. At least I'm aging myself, but that's it. I know Pat's number. I mean, it's just very, very few numbers that I know. But and Asanya, every week mobile usage is up. Well, you took on a new job recently, so I know you're especially busy. And you have a 2.5-year-old, so I can't read it.
Do it.
But thank you for adding some wisdom there. I have a confession. So we were joking before around the kind of the 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. emails, and this is back in the modern survey days. I actually I was working, in a startup. You're working around the clock sometimes, but I intentionally, and this was a perception thing for me, and I don't necessarily suggest this, but I would write emails, kind of go through emails if the day was busy or I was traveling, and then I would schedule them to send in the morning. So I would actually write them, and then because I didn't want our clients to feel like, why is the COO of the organization sending emails at 2 a.m.? So I actually scheduled them. Again, this is not good advice for anybody, but I'm just sharing this as this is a very open community, and this is something that sounds like you're trying to certainly wouldn't do now.
that you're trying to hide a
Yeah, it
defect.
was.
That's what that is. Yeah.
It was absolutely. No, I mean, no, I'm admitting it. That's why I'm coming
Yeah.
clean. This was, 10, 15,
Yeah.
10, 12 years ago, but it was the only time I had to do it. And yet I wanted to set a good, I wanted our employees not to think I'm working around the clock, or our clients to think, to me, that wasn't a value. Like, look how busy he is. It was actually more of so I was very thoughtful about it, because I didn't want to set a precedent very, very, very high.
So
Well,
I've got to.
yeah. I would say, and you're being considerate of them, right? Like, if they don't want to,
Yeah.
if an employee gets that ping at 1 a.m, I know I have folks on our team who they'll assume it's code red. I got to get up and do something, which
Right.
you don't necessarily want.
So Sean, I've got a question for you,
Yeah.
and then I do want to leave just a few minutes at the end to make sure you get a chance to let
Okay.
folks know how they can learn more about your company and your
Sure,
app
sure.
and all that. But so talk about your experiences. So you're a genius app developer with a very virtuous mission, and we appreciate what you do and how you're thinking about this, and love how you're bringing really kind of the behavioral science as part of this, because I do think that's really an expanding part of the toolkit for HR, as they start thinking about this. But let's flip it. So there's a lot of, the HR community talks about employee experience design a lot, and which is, how are we going to design, the experience of work here for companies? And the approach to this can come from any number of different places in leadership, any different kinds of strategies and approaches that they use to get to it. And I know you've been selling into the enterprise now, and I've learned about some of your wins, et cetera. But in terms of how you're thinking about trying to come up with a solution, a mission-driven solution for a problem, and what you're seeing organizations, how they're maybe framing it and seeing it, what's the observation you have there? Do you feel like you're able to kind of connect into that, or do you think is there a misalignment sometimes in terms of what organizations are trying to do, and maybe how an app like yours is trying to actually solve for it?
Yeah, I'm reminded sometimes of the old Ford quote where she said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. It's not quite at that level. But folks are used to health and wellness, especially during the pandemic, right? Folks are thinking, all right, mental health, caregiving became a big one for folks with kids at home. It's a tough scenario, right? Especially with schools, being at the state they're in. So finding ways to help support on that side has been big. We plug in pretty well. I would say if you're used to an existing wellness solution, folks can think of Better You as an extension of what they're doing. Something that can help drive engagement, something that can give folks a way to keep up with their health and wellness. One of the top things that people are looking to drive is engagement. They want people to be able to do something and stick with it. And it's hard when you're asking people to go in and enter something. Hey, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I do the other? And really for us in enterprise, the light bulb moment is that my phone can do the heavy lifting. My phone could give me credit for calling mom this week. It could give me credit for logging off Netflix and going to bed at a reasonable hour. And so by leveraging that power of the phone, you're able to bring a lot of those different engagement pieces and help folks stay in the game longer. And so that's when we find those great wins. Oftentimes it's people who are looking to drive better engagement around their teams, better health around their teams. And they're familiar with how painful it can be to try to go into something every day and enter things. It just doesn't always happen. Try as we'd like.
Yeah. I mean, I think the summary of, kind of what we're hearing today, and then we'll turn it over to you, Sean, to let everyone know how they can reach you and contact you. But we need to continue to embrace technology. We need to embrace, how we stay connected and connectedness, but we need to be mindful and respectful of what individuals need, what we need. We need to be open and honest about what we need. Right. I think we need to listen to those triggers, right, that we might have, and those needs that we have. And again, this really comes down to making sure and being a part of that change in your organization that does focus on empathetic culture, and making sure leaders understand the concept of humility and caring. And because none of this success, I think, can work under an umbrella where organizations don't respect that and drive for a culture that is truly focused on caring for their people beyond just the work they do, right? And I think I'm so happy and proud that we're this movement seems to be underway where we're just finding ourselves where organizations are, and These are the joys of working in a really old building. You can hear chainsaws in the background. If anyone hears that,
Chainsaws.
we love it. It sounds like like a chainsaw to me, but so there really is nobody with a chainsaw behind me, but it seemed dramatic. So I hope everyone took some great ideas away from this. We're not suggesting that you drop your phone in the bathtub or the river. We are not at all. In fact, we need it to call our moms or our fathers or our friends and stay connected. But we also need to be mindful and listen to ourselves and listen to our brains and listen to our bodies, right? To make sure we're staying healthy, focused, and able to bring the best to our family and our friends and our work. So with that, Sean, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, and maybe just to build off that last point, Dan, because I love it so much. Every day I wake up, I have the ability to leave my phone at home. I've never intentionally chosen that route, right? So it's about, for us, how can we help you make the most of your day? We look at our device, it's many things, and it's really scary that the numbers of how much time we spend there goes up, and away every single year. But it's also this opportunity, right? What better way to help somebody be the person they want to see in the mirror tomorrow than by helping them make better choices today? And so that's really what we think the power of this thing can be. Because you're right, it is calling mom, it is learning Spanish, it is even entertainment. The time we intend to waste is not wasted time, right? So there's a lot of greatness in it too. So I really had a great time sharing a little bit more on the topic. How to stay connected with us, Better You. So I'm going to drop our LinkedIn right there in the chat. So that's us. You also can find us at betteryou.ai. That's our website. And if you've got other questions, if you're interested in the topic, shoot me a note on LinkedIn, shoot me a note on Twitter. Happy to pick up the thread on any of those channels.
Amazing.
So great. Thank you. And I love your last quote there. The time we intend to waste is not wasted time. I think, that's I think that's a powerful statement, because it's okay to check out. It's okay to unwind. So anyway, thank you, Sean. It's so helpful. Brilliant mind, awesome company, important mission, taking care of people. I love the work you're doing. And thank you for this awesome community and all the comments. I think we got to most comments, but I appreciate everyone chiming in. And with that, we have 2 minutes. Pat, any parting words of wisdom as my older brother?
Well, Sean, thank you again. I just always enjoy these conversations. Keep up the great work. You guys are really finding a path forward. And like I was just thinking about this, like a mantra for all of us. Yeah, make better choices today so our tomorrow is better, right? And that's kind of in the end what this ends up being about. So keep up the good fight, and to the community out there, thanks for being with us on this journey to make a difference in the whole person experience for all of us.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sean. Thanks to everybody.
Adios.
Have a wonderful day. Stay warm to those in Minneapolis. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.